Welcome to Health and Veritas. I'm Harlan Krumholtz.
And I'm Howie Foreman. We're physicians and professors at Yale University. We're trying to get closer to the truth about health and healthcare. Today, our guest is Dr. Sarah Taylor. But we always like to check in on current or hot topics in health and healthcare. And so, Harlan, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Howie. I don't know. This week I thought I'd talk about a little bit about this direct-to-consumer healthcare through the lens of hims and hers. You've heard of hims and hers, of course, right?
I have, and they were obviously a big topic during the Super Bowl for other reasons.
Well,
So,
they're a
yeah,
juggernaut. They're a juggernaut. And, they're really part of this broader shift in healthcare around trust and information access and what's happening with regard to how people are actually getting their care. So they're a really dynamic case study in this direct-to-consumer healthcare. They've achieved this remarkable growth. Their revenue, is just about 1.5 billion last year, a 69% increase year over year. And their subscriber base, they're people who just are repetitively getting, prescriptions and so forth from them, reached 2.2 million, which was a 45% increase over the prior year, sort of indicating this strong consumer demand for convenient, technology-driven health services. And that what they do is that they provide medical care via apps and telehealth. So they leverage sort of data analytics and a little bit AI, at least they say so, to offer these sort of personalized solutions and experiences. Of course, they do their own compounding. So they're kind of producing for you what they're saying you need. And the appeal is something like, consumers can avoid traditional healthcare pain points such as inconvenient appointment times, short visits, impersonal interactions, and they can get this sort of fast, convenient, responsive care that they're promoting as being tailored to their needs. And I think it sort of started off as a company that was providing things that had some stigma around them, like,
yeah,
erectile
erectile
dysfunction
dysfunction.
or
Yeah,
baldness. People were reluctant to even go to their doctors and be able to talk about these things. And here they could sort of quickly and with the belief confidentially be able to have these sort of quick interactions and thinking that, I really don't need to talk to someone for an hour about this. I just need to get Viagra. And how do I get that? So, and the idea was that, this is not just about innovation in the technology, but
right.
I think it is also emblematic of this growing skepticism towards traditional healthcare providers. And you had talked about this Gallup poll, and we have discussed about how trust in medical doctors has declined dramatically for even over the last, like, from 2021 to 2024.
Yes,
About 2/3 of people said that they trusted their doctors, down to about half of people saying that
right.
they trusted. That's the steepest drop among all the surveyed professions. Of course, we're in this moment where people are not trusting authority figures, but the doctors had the steepest decline. And then there's a Wall Street Journal article that came out just, I think, yesterday, day before, that was talking about, what is this problem? People not trusting their doctors, having these rushed appointments, fragmented care, inadequate communication. And I think it's just that people are feeling unheard, undervalued, and having options to get answers elsewhere. The CDC recently reported that 60% of American adults now use the internet to search for medical information. Women a little bit more likely than men, and it's higher, as you might expect, among younger people. My youngest daughter, I know, like, she has a problem. She'd rather transact it on her phone than actually go see someone at the doctor's office. And this is breaking down the traditional information asymmetry, the idea that you needed to go to someone who had the knowledge because you don't have the knowledge. And now with these chat GPT and all these other things, I mean, people are going to be able to get access to information at whatever literacy level they have. And I think this is going to really disrupt the entire healthcare system. And so I just want to, in summary, there's this building on the mistrust, the inconvenience, the traditional ways of doing things, feeling unheard and impersonal care. This is moving towards this hyper personalization. I saw, they've got, this these combo pills, where they're putting together something special for you. By the way, we can talk about compounding because this is like not what's being FDA approved. They're kind of creating their own special meds for you.
And that's where a lot of that growth came from. So I would just be a little skeptical about the obesity side of things because a lot of that growth is at risk to giving people semaglutide or even tirzepatide, not through the traditional channel of Eli Lilly or Novo Nordisk, but rather through their secondary market that they have.
Yeah, but I think once you've got 2.2 million people, people are
Yeah,
starting to get used to this as a way. They do have, they've got these hair blends. They've
yeah.
got, also, like I said, erectile dysfunction and baldness things. Some of the stuff they've got, which has got strong evidence behind it, some of the stuff is not as strong evidence behind it. But, it's pretty impressive what they've been able 45% subscriber growth over a year. Like I said, 69% revenue growth. Some of it being fueled by the anti-obesity, a lot of it being fueled by the anti-obesity medications, but they're poised for a lot of stuff, mental health, derm, they're going to continue the sexual.
You and I have talked about before that if you're going to have to wait 6 months for an appointment to see your own specialist versus getting on an app and having something resolved in 15 minutes or half an hour, it doesn't take much to overcome that. I mean, it's an easy pivot to try.
Yeah, I think, we're seeing some of these clinics closing, the primary care clinics like at Walmart's, Walgreens, that
Yeah.
that were built like this. But this thing, seems to be growing. We're going to see whether how dependent it was on weight loss, see what happens next year. But if I were the big healthcare systems, I'd be looking on my shoulder because once they have a relationship with these people, their ability to steer and suggest and create, going to centers of excellence, like people may not go anymore to the closest place for what they need if they feel they're going to get special care, personalized care somewhere else. It may change the whole face of the way that
I agree.
this discretionary care gets taken care of. But anyway,
That's
I just wanted to share that they had the recent investor call. So some of this came from the stuff in their investor call. I'm excited about this interview. Let's get to it.
Dr. Sarah Taylor is the director of neonatal clinical research as well as a professor of pediatrics in neonatal and perinatal medicine at the Yale School of Medicine. A practicing physician, she's also the chief of neonatal perinatal medicine at Yale New Haven Hospital. Her research focuses on infant nutrition and growth and centers on human milk medicine, including disparities in lactation, the biology of milk production, and the role of human milk intake in preterm infant growth and development. Dr. Taylor established the Yale Neonatal Nourish, which stands for Yale Neonatal Nutrition Outcomes Research in Sustaining Mother and Infant Health Center to investigate how fetal and neonatal nutritional and metabolic exposures impact outcomes. She received her bachelor's degree from Wake Forest University, her medical degree from the University of Miami, Miller School of Medicine, and she completed her pediatric residency at the Medical University of South Carolina, as well as her neonatal perinatal fellowship, where she also received a Master of Science in Clinical Research. And I have to say that you and I first met when a medical student came to me upon arriving at Yale, a student who was going into the MD PhD program, and she was interested in the intersection of cost and women's health and neonatal health. And she was interested in breast milk banking or human milk banking. And so we started talking about this topic, and I did not know nearly enough about human milk, breast milk. And so we reached out to you, and she was actually enthralled with that. She knew of you as well. I think she might have even talked to you separately. And we did this project on what is the cost of human milk, breast milk. And it got me thinking a lot about it, but I don't know nearly enough. And in the ensuing time, there's just been a lot of issues around breast milk or human milk. So, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about what mothers, new mothers or future mothers or anybody should know about the concerns people raise about human milk versus powdered milk? What are the trade offs? What are the considerations?
And what was it like working with Howie? That's what we really want to know.
Yeah. Well, I will say it was an excellent opportunity to work with Howie. My knowledge of health economics is incredibly small, and I learned a lot, steep learning curve in writing that paper. So really enjoyed that a collaboration, and thank you all for the invitation to be here. This is fantastic. So, yeah, when it comes to infant feeding, we have a couple of options. Formula feeding is the most common other option that is not, from a human. So then that formula can be either a powdered supplement, which is the less expensive type. It's what is the most available, say, in the grocery stores and such, or it can be a liquid. And I think some of what you're referring to, Howie, is the controversies that have gone on with the powdered formulas not being sterile. And so potentially can carry pathogens that can impact and have impact babies. But when it comes to the human milk, which is either feeding at the breast or feeding mom's milk from a bottle, or the donor human milk, which is always, of course, fed from a bottle, the important things to know is that we've done a great job in the US of getting families interested in breastfeeding. 80% of women choose to initiate breastfeeding, which is great, and it should always be a choice. Our job as healthcare providers is to inform, and then the family chooses what they want to do. And some choose formula feeding, which is also acceptable as long as it's an informed decision. 80% of women are initiating breastfeeding, they drop off so quickly. And this gets to the paper you and I wrote. Breastfeeding is it, I think the title was it's not a free lunch. There's a lot of work that goes into a breastfeeding family. It's not uncommon, and actually it's more common for families to not achieve their goals for breastfeeding, because we're down to a rate of about 26% when you look at exclusively breastfeeding through 6 months, which is what the American Academy of Pediatrics and the World Health Organization both recommend. So we've gone from 80% to 26% in 6 months. So that's the hard work that is not being adequately supported. And so I want all moms to know that, like, that they're not alone, that it's a wonderful, beautiful thing to do. I don't want to make it sound like it's just all difficult. When it works, when it finally clicks, it's easy. It's all the work to establish breastfeeding, which is where we lose so many people from achieving their feeding goals. And then it's also trying to sustain breastfeeding when you're going back to work, when you're taking care of other kids, when you're taking care of other family members. Just so many things that get in the way of that.
Yeah, I'll turn it right over to you, Harlan, but we addressed in the paper peripherally, but it is challenging for a lawyer or a radiologist to continue to pump or breastfeed when they go back to work. It's practically impossible for a service worker in many firms to be able to do that. So it varies tremendously on what type of work you do and whether you have to work.
Well, it's so important. This has to do with, what kind of choices people make and what kind of opportunities they have. I was fascinated by a lot of the other aspects of this that you have delved into that I think people listening would like to hear about. And I'm going to tick off some. I don't know. I have to share my time with Howie, so I'll let Howie ask his question. But I've got a bunch here that I want to. The traditional view of breastfeeding emphasizes the mother's role, but recent research, including what you've written about, talks about the infant's active contribution, which is something I didn't really appreciate or understand. In that infant suckling stimulates hormonal and cellular responses within the breast, influencing the actual milk composition and also its volume and nutrient density. And milk fat content, for example, is lowest when the breast is full, highest when it's nearly drained, suggesting infants can indirectly control their nutritional intake through feeding behavior. Can you just talk a little bit about how the infant influences the biological processes that determine breast milk composition during these nursing sessions? Because this was something entirely new to me when I was reading your work.
Yeah, it's new to us too. It really is. This is a new area, and I will say a fair amount of it is based on preliminary data or hypothesis considerations. We still have quite a bit to do to really prove all of these mechanisms. But yes, that feeding pattern of the infant, how they suckle, the pace that they set, how long they suckle, and that pace changes through a breastfeed, and it's completely unique to the individual infant. Even, a mom, probably many women could tell you this, they've breastfed more than one child. They had a different lactation experience with each child because each child has their own personality when it comes to feeding.
Even at
And
that very young moment of birth,
even at
after
that
birth,
very
yeah,
young
yeah.
exactly, yeah. This is from the beginning, and these babies have been developing suckling in utero. It's not uncommon to see them sucking on a thumb when they are in utero, and that's another thing. Sometimes at the breast can be a baby can change to where it's completely non-nutritive, where they're actually not suckling to where they get food, but instead suckling just for comfort. They can make that change.
Well, let me sneak another one quick in, then I'll hand it back to Howie, which is breast milk as a flavor bridge. And this is another interesting concept. The human milk transmits dietary flavors from the mother's diet, beginning even in utero through the amniotic fluid. And that this, what I think you were terming this flavor bridge concept, explains why some infants develop preferences for certain foods early in life. The exposure can shape dietary acceptance and potentially influence eating patterns later in childhood. I mean, this is really interesting that, whether a mom's eating spicy foods or, can you just maybe help us understand this? How robust is this connection between flavors transmitted through breast milk and children's later dietary preferences? Is it well established?
Yeah, so one of the co-collaborators on that paper has done most of that research, and she is just really has the details of this, and really looking at the flavor patterns is quite innovative, but yet also impressive. So we still are determining all the variations here and what they could possibly mean for future taste. So not going to say that it's fully established, except that we know that there is an association, or there is some sort of patterning that's occurring with this.
I want to pivot. It's not a full pivot because it's all really related, but you've also done a lot of work on bringing parents and grandparents into the neonatal intensive care unit, which historically was never the case. I mean, if anything, parents were kept on the other side of a wall and rarely allowed to interact with their neonates. And some of this research has to do also with breastfeeding. And I was just wondering about what are the take home messages for our audience about evolving patterns of couplet care, as you talked about it, or more involvement of family members in these very, very delicate neonates?
So this was a huge culture change during my time as a neonatologist. When I started out, the we had visiting hours in the NICU, and we would kick parents out, for the lack
Yeah.
of a better term, when we did not want them there. And of course, staff were used to that. So then, when all of a sudden there's this idea that families should have 24/7 access to their infant, this, staff, I can't work like that. We're not going to be able to do our jobs. It was just an incredible change to do that. And once we started doing that, though, it just kept rolling. And really, where we are now, and where we should be, is when the family is in the intensive care unit, that area around their baby, that's their home away from home. That is the family space. And we are the guest. And now we're important guests because we might be doing some really critical things to take care of that baby. But we still need to realize and not refer to the families as visitors to their baby. They're not the visitors. We're actually the visitors. They are there where they're supposed to be with their baby. Same with grandparents and of course fathers feeling very involved. We focus a lot on moms in neonatology because we need mom's milk, and we need to remember to also focus on the dads, of course, because they're critical to their baby's development. We're still learning how to do this well in an intensive care unit, but that new mental model where you're the visitor to the room. So we're fortunate at Yale New Haven Hospital, we have single patient rooms. So when I walk into that room, in the past, it would have been my room and the family was visiting. Now it's their room. I'm asking permission to enter, and I'm, treating it as their family space. Whole new mental model, but hopefully families are feeling that difference. And we need to do this because bonding with their NICU baby, I mean, it's critical that they develop the same bonds that they would if this infant was at home. So we really need to empower them with that opportunity to do that.
And you're showing some early outcomes that, follow up visits and breastfeeding are more likely if you're able to have more encounters.
Absolutely, yes. So if the families are able to be there and be engaged in the care, that's the other thing. why can't the family change the diaper or start the feed, even if it's, like a syringe feed that we're giving, or a tube down to the stomach. They can hold the feed while it's being given. All of those things definitely impact mother's milk supply, and we know stress relates to mother's milk supply. So the less stress, the more positive hormones she's experiencing, endorphins being there with her baby, the better her milk supply is going to be. And then of course families are more engaged if they're there and we're talking to them about what to expect at home and why their baby's going to need this follow-up appointment. They're much more likely to go than if we just hand them a paper at discharge and say, show up at all these appointments.
Yeah, I think that's just brilliant. What a great frame shift. I mean, who is the visitor here, and how important is that to people's ability to bond and encourage recovery? It's incredible. I love hearing it. Okay, I'm going to go back to the breast milk. I'm going to pepper you with two other quick questions. Going to get into my two quick questions here. One is, I was surprised to learn that breast milk actually contains its own microbiome, this sort of complex community of microorganisms that influence gut colonization, immunity, long-term health, and that infants shape the milk microbiome through their own oral microbiome, what's in their mouth. And so it turns out like they're each unique in the way that they've got this sort of community growing with them, like, as we all do. And some of it's transferred during breastfeeding, and that disruptions such as preterm birth or antibiotic use and so forth can influence this. How significant is the role of the infant's microbiome in shaping this breast milk consumption, and what implications does it have? Because I don't think we've thought that much about that in the past. By the way, we're often sticking our own fingers in their mouth, so they can suck on our thumbs and stuff like that. By the way, my daughter just had a baby, so I'm watching her breastfeed. By the way, she's not only a medical student, but she's a registered dietitian, so she's very interested in nutrition.
Wow. Oh,
So this is a shout out to Sarah. I hope she's listening to this, because it's kind of a cool way to explore it.
absolutely. Oh, that makes me so happy to hear of a medical student who's also a registered dietitian. That's perfect. And a new mom.
And a new mom, yeah.
Yeah, that is great. So yeah, so this goes a little bit to what I was talking about with the infant's reflux, the infant's oral microbiome. This is an area, and I was actually recently with other researchers in this field to make sure that, just to kind of discuss, are we all still thinking about this the same way? Because we need to prove it. There's a lot of this that we need to prove. But the milk, first of all, the milk contains the microorganisms from mom's gut. How does bacteria get from mom's gut to the breast milk? We're not 100% sure how that travels. We think it may be like through the lymph system rather than through the blood system, so kind of through the lymph node system. There's a lot of lymph tracts that go through our chest, that from the GI tract, that might then drop off these bacteria at the mammary gland. But that we've got to figure out. It's a long held theory that we've really need to explore further. And then, yeah, the impact of the baby. And so, one way to look at this is how the microbiome of the milk may be different in different pregnancies. Some of that could be environmental and exposures, but looking at how each infant may impact the microbiome.
Okay, I'm going to get in my last one here, because I know we're getting close to time. So another area that's really interesting to me is these breast pumps. So you and Howie, thought a lot about what do they cost and do people get access to them, but you've also highlighted that this research that there are differences in milk expressed through pumping versus direct breastfeeding. So it's not just you can just stick these pumps on and you're going to get the same milk that you would have got with the baby, and that relates to the research you're doing about how the baby interacting with the breast is influencing the nutrition, and that also the pumps can vary in terms of, okay, their effectiveness I get, like how much milk they can do, and how comfortable they are. But I didn't realize that the different pumps may vary in the kind of milk composition that they produce. And so I just wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that, because I think when people are shopping for breast pumps, or they're thinking about breast pumps, they're just thinking this is just taking the place of the infant. It's just producing the milk. Again, comfort, cost, people think about that, but they don't think that actually they may vary in the quality of the milk that they're producing. That was a surprise to me.
Yeah. Uh, so absolutely, and it is, and it's an area that, again, a lot of what your great questions you're asking, because these are the areas we need to continue to explore. But yes, I would say when you're shopping for breast pumps, for one, is to if you're going to be separated from your infant, so especially in, say, your infant's in the neonatal intensive care unit, you need what we call a hospital grade pump. It is an expensive pump, so most people rent them rather than buying them. They can be they're made so that more than one person can use them, so you can rent them. But that is a pump that is made to sustain breast milk even when you're not putting your infant to breast, or rarely putting your infant to breast. Otherwise, it is nice. The availability of pumps, the specialty of pumps has exploded in, say, the past 20 years. So there's so many more options for families, but it also then is really confusing. There's pumps such as hands-free pumps. There's pumps that you can wear under your clothes. And I was with someone this weekend in the NICU who was pumping, and I would have never known it. I couldn't hear a thing and such. Those are wonderful and have changed, when Howie talks about people who weren't ever able to breastfeeding, anesthesiologists had a difficult time breastfeeding because they don't really control their schedule, right? That's the surgery goes 6 hours, you're there. They now are able to pump by these hands-free pumps. So, but those should not be where you start. You should start with more of an established standard breast pump at home. And then as you establish your lactation and your milk's coming in, say you're getting to more like 4 weeks lactation, then you can try out these other options. Some of them don't work for all women. And so one thing to consider is, and unfortunately it can get expensive if you purchase one and then it just did not work for you. But I think the first thing is to make sure that pump is, the right pump for the woman to sustain the milk supply. Otherwise, the biggest thing is to make sure that the breasts are fully pumped so you get all of that fat. You'd mentioned, Harlan, that fat is often at the end of the feed. And I think that's the biggest mistake that we make is we're rushed. So we can only have so much time to pump, and we don't pump to emptying of the breast. And you really have to pump to emptying of the breast. One, so your baby gets the fat. Two, because it's breast emptying that keeps the supply up.
Yeah. Oh, this is just terrific. What a great interview. Thank you.
You are awesome. I really do say when I talk to our listeners, I think that this is what makes Yale great, is that we have these colleagues who are subject matter experts, leaders in their field, running clinical services and practicing medicine. You're astonishing and a great friend. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I loved it. You guys have great questions.
Howie, that was terrific. Wow. I'm so glad that you brought her in, and somebody you've collaborated with. She's just, that was just amazing. But now let's get to another favorite part of the show for me, hearing what you've got to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many negative topics that I thought about, but I realized that there's actually some good news out. And I thought maybe we could just highlight a paper that's in
I am dying for good news.
I know.
For good news. I'm like someone in a desert, please.
Here you go. So here it is. There's a paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which is a follow-up to our podcast of 18 months ago, episode 97 to be exact. And in that episode, we talked about the Healthy Opportunities Pilot Program in North Carolina, which is something that was first conceived by our alum Secretary of Health, Mandy Cohen, when she was still in that office, but the pilot itself started right after her departure. This pilot project sought to test whether interventions in social determinants of health across several domains could reduce healthcare spending. This is a long-standing important issue to resolve, and it was illuminated over a decade ago by the book written by Lauren Taylor and Betsy Bradley. Both are prior guests on this podcast, and their book was The American Healthcare Paradox: Why Spending More is Getting Us Less. So this will become clearer in a minute. So back to this pilot. This intervention provides greater food security, violence protection, and greater housing security through a host of specific and trackable interventions, and importantly, evaluates the outcomes and notably the total program costs and medical costs in this Medicaid population. It was made possible through a federal Medicaid waiver, and it began in March 2022, so 3 years ago. But tracking began even a year before that. We've previously reported some really early results, but now we have a 20-month evaluation period, and more results are going to come. So what have they learned? Number one, costs go up initially because the interventions actually cost money. No surprise there. Costs associated with food, housing, social services are meaningful. But the spending then turns down in a substantial, statistically significant way compared to the comparator group. So much so that by month 8, costs are lower for the intervention for the pilot project group. Emergency department use was lower. There's no statistically significant change, at least in this period, for inpatient admissions or outpatient visits. This is by no means a double-blind, randomized controlled trial, but it is still a methodologically sound investigation with many limitations, and the authors acknowledge them. But the early results are very enlightening and favorable. 80% of the interventions are around food, so that's a key point to make. And much of that is just simply fruits and vegetables and delivered or available healthy meals. It also includes training around diabetes and nutrition management and education. And I'm not going to assert that this proves that certain health-related social needs interventions are actually cost savings, because we're not there yet. But it brings us closer to understanding them, and the answer sort of leans toward yes. We need to do more thoughtful investigations and continue to follow this cohort over the remaining years of the investigation. And we should also be open to the possibility that short-term investments in health and well-being for this population may yield longer-term savings, as well as healthier, happier people. So I felt like that was a really positive study that wasn't getting nearly enough press during a time of really a lot of health news.
So do you have any sense that this will be something others will pick up on?
So it's very well watched. It's an expensive pilot project. It's only, like I said, 20 months into the 5-year investigation. But I think it gives more fodder to at least maintaining this pilot project, particularly when people are talking about cutting Medicaid. And it really should encourage communities that are impoverished, for which they live in, what are called nutrition or food deserts, to consider these interventions, particularly since they do seem to start to pay back after 8 months or so.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. Thank you for covering that. I think what to me strikes me as important is not only did they do the project, but they were committed to doing the science to try to report out what they found. And then there is this piece about you have to make an investment. It may not be an immediate return.
Right.
And the question will be whether or not people have the budget to be able to weather that initial period in order to get the longer.
That's exactly right.
Longer benefit. But that's just terrific and good. So, and next week, Howie, maybe we can talk a little bit about, we've got our NIH nominee and our FDA nominees going before Congress this week. And
we've got a lot to cover.
So there'll be a lot of news. News. Yep. You've been listening to Health and Veritas with Harlan Krumholtz and Howie Foreman.
So how do we do? To give us your feedback or to keep the conversation going, email us at health.veritas@yale.edu or follow us on social media, particularly LinkedIn or Blue Sky.
And we always love to hear your feedback. Give us your questions, your experiences on these topics. Rate us if you'd like. It helps people find us. We always enjoy that too.
We certainly do. And if you have questions about the MBA for Executives program at the Yale School of Management, reach out via email for more information or check out our website at som.yale.edu/EMBA.
Health and Veritas is produced with the amazing Yale School of Management and the incredible Yale School of Public Health. And thanks to our researchers, the spectacular Nancy Giel, Sophia Stump, Tobias Liu, and to our remarkable producer, Miranda Schaefer. It's great to work with all of them and to work with you, Howie, and to work with you.
It is the greatest joy, honestly, working with all of you. So thank you all very much.
Talk to you soon, Howie.
Thanks very much, Harlan. Talk to you soon.